The orderly tries to imagine the age in which Old Man Perkins was forced to endure 1930s America. A time before the bomb, before the computer, before the jet, before America became a global empire. The evil empire. How times have indeed changed for everyone. Everyone except blacks. For the rapidly diminishing black populace, life in the 21st century appears very much like 1930s Mississippi, despite having a so-called black president. A white man in blackface, young Perkins thinks to himself. How lacking of courage, of grit. How the mulatto cringed when asked to stand up for his people, to speak out on behalf of their suffering. What good? What good would voting do? How cruelly the blacks living in the 21st century had been betrayed, bamboozled. The young orderly gingerly strokes the old man's head. He imagines himself in that very same bed, perhaps 60 or even 70 years later. How would he find his people? What would the world be like? How would the condition of the black man have changed? Would there be any truly black people left? Would the ever-increasing pogrom of the black race continue? Would new man-made viruses accomplish its genocidal goal? Or would it be a slow death brought about by unjust laws? Laws designed specifically to deprive blacks of the right to vote. As if voting would do any good. From the young attendant's perspective, the majority of blacks in political office were out to enrich themselves. They told the people what they wanted to hear, not what they needed to hear. Tickling their ears instead of empowering or enlightening them. They were a collection of swindlers, buffoons, brainwashed by constant bombardment by the media, programmed to worship white culture. They were force-fed, glutted on all the false values offered by an empty and soulless society. But above all, standing at the apex, the very pinnacle of Everest, there, exalted at its tip, was what meant all, absolutely all, that being the white woman. Like the whore of Babylon, white America demanded she be worshipped. Back then in Mr. Perkins' time, a time of Uncle Tom's minstrel shows and Coon and Coons, interracial relationships were strictly taboo, forbidden. Back then, the black man was forced to look for the beauty that shined within his own people, his own women. In those days, a black man had to search deep within himself to find the beauty that God himself had placed within him. The tight grip of Old Man Perkins forces the young orderly from his state of deep introspection. After giving the old man another sip of cold water from the cup, Mr. Perkins continues speaking, describing the unfavorable characteristics of the various residents of Muskie. He spoke of the deputy, Darrell, Bubba. He spoke of Kevin, Pastor Jackson, and Miss Hazel. He spoke lovingly of his grandmother, Miss Emma. But as soon as the room is suddenly lit up by a blinding flash of lightning, followed by a deafening peal of thunder, the old man began speaking in an affrighted whisper. The young orderly grew tense at the sight of the old man trembling in fear. Not an ordinary fear, but a cold, stark terror. His memory seemed to torture him, forcing him to recall, to relive the night he and Kevin had followed the mysterious Mr. Pickman. It was the night before Christmas Eve. the church was having a late-night prayer meeting. It was to last from 10 to midnight. All the adults in the community were in attendance. For Mount Olive First Missionary Baptist Church of Muskie, it was an annual ritual, something that had been practiced by the Negroes of the community since the founding of the church back in the 1880s. Young Perkins and Kevin had agreed ahead of time to meet at the crossroads at the stroke of 10. Kevin reassuring Perkins that his sisters would at that time be fast asleep, leaving them free to trail the mysterious Mr. Pickman, who had been seen in the late hours walking in the direction of the swamps. The haunted swamps. The swamps of the dead. Pickman was seen taking the narrow path that led in the direction of old Granny Hagen, the conjure woman's shack. The glow of a gibbous moon threw an eerie light on the crossroads of Colored Town as the figures of two young men furtively approached. "Right on time," young Perkins says with a smile of self-satisfaction. "Right on time," replies Kevin with a self-satisfied smile. "Are you ready?" "Ready," replies young Perkins. Whereupon the two young men take position in the high weeds that line the road. Their waiting is not in vain, for soon another figure appears, clad in a black robe, a hooded robe in fact, was none other than the mysterious Mr. Pickman. He walks in a steady, determined pace. Passing the crossroads, he was indeed headed in the direction of the swamps. In his hand he carried a thickly bound book, the same book he had to read from that night at the cemetery, the night in which they had narrowly escaped the wrath of the Thing. "Did you see that?" young Perkins questions his companion. Swallowing hard, Kevin replies with a, yeah. Nervously looking around, Kevin's hands began to tremble. With eyes reflecting a level of anxiety, he seeks reassurance. "Are you sure? I mean, I ain't scared, but is you sure you want to do this?" Young Perkins is amused by Kevin's timidity. Perkins attempts to stop, to lighten the mood by saying, "Sure, man, come on now. Ain't you curious? Don't you want to see what he'd been up to?" Once more swallowing hard, Kevin nods his head in agreement. Inhaling deeply, Kevin gathers in the crisp winter night's air, filling his lungs to capacity with life-giving oxygen. Renewing himself with courage, he then exhales, dispelling all fear, purging himself of all anxiety. Thus liberated from the bonds of cowardice, no longer apprehensive, Kevin nods his head in the affirmative. The bold expression on his face denotes a determined assurance. Beneath the light of a winter's moon, with the night's chill prickling their skin like thousands of tiny needles, young Perkins is proud of his companion, extremely impressed by Kevin, who looks, somehow, noble. There's something regal, something royal about him. He reflects an inner strength he had never seen before. Not in Booker, not in Jojo, not even in the school bully who, you might say, ruled the roost. Young Perkins hadn't seen that level of faithful assurance in any colored boy. Though it is fair to say that Pastor Jackson did possess a certain spiritual power. He was indeed a man of courage, of conviction, but damn, Kevin had grit, true grit. Young Perkins thought to himself, "Hell, tonight I'd follow you through the gates of hell." Unbeknownst to him, that is exactly where the road would lead. At approximately 10:25 p.m. on the night of December 23rd, 1932, in the county of Muskie, in the state of Mississippi, two colored boys were about to experience that which no one on earth would be called to endure. As Mr. Pickman continued in the direction of the haunted swamps, the swamps of the dead, he had no inkling that he was being followed, trailed, stealthily shadowed, watched by curious eyes, his every movement inquisitively observed. As the trees began to grow thick around them, the two boys continued to follow, always keeping Mr. Pickman under constant observation. But as the mysterious figure continued on his way, Kevin and young Perkins began to notice a difference in the trees. There was a death-like quality about them. Moss-covered branches with limbs hideously contorted mimed agonized poses, horribly resembling the half-starved arms and legs of tortured men. Men with rotted hands, hands with painfully arthritic fingers, cadaverous hands, the hanging molds having the unnerving appearance of necrotic flesh. Kevin, as brave as ever, remained unaffected, even as every tree seemed covered with a thick, swampish slime, the dead and dying moss dangling down like long strips of greenish-purple flesh. As they continued tracking the mysterious robed figure, the high weeds grew taller, increasing in density, the firm soil beneath their feet gradually turning into mire. The change in their surroundings became more profound. As a heavy mist began to rise, the narrow road turned into a thin trail as a ghostly miasma rose from the boiling bog pits. How grotesque the surroundings! There were no sounds of nature, no frogs croaking, no crickets chirping. Through the graveyard silence, all that was heard was the footsteps of the hooded figure of Mr. Pickman, and that god-awful sound, the hissing, the bubbling sound of gases slowly escaping from the surrounding mud. Young Perkins wished that he had waxed stuffed ears as Ulysses' men had. God in heaven, what fools they were! It chilled the blood, turned the stomach, to hear the constant emissions from the deadly pits of quicksand. Dear God, how it burped and bubbled, belching forth a revolting miasma. The hot steam rising from the sulfur pits resembled open mouths, breathing, bubbling like a witch's cauldron. A cauldron of death, a crucible of horrors. Still, they continued. Sometimes a misstep sent them sinking knee-deep into the bubbling mire. At one time, a diamondback rattler came within striking distance. Undaunted, the young men continued on, always keeping the mysterious figure within view. Tonight's surveillance of Mr. Pickman was different than their previous tailing of him to
Pottersfield. Although he traveled in the same secretive manner, tonight seemed different. Now they found themselves deep within the heart of that malevolent realm. A strange world of phantasmagoria, there within the living, breathing swamps. The swamps of the dead was heard a distant moan. A faint and lonely moan, as if someone were in pain. Its reverberations echoing just above the sound of the bubbling sulfur pits. The sound of the distant moan was joined by the sound of a woman weeping, it also seeming to emanate from everywhere. It lurked within every shadow, from the highest branches of moss-covered trees down to the boiling pits around them. It came from nowhere and everywhere. Now Kevin began to show his mortality. His face no longer exuded confidence. Kevin's bravado swiftly fled away. His face began to reflect a fearful unease, a feeling that young Perkins had felt all along but had the inner resolve to mask. Then they saw the thing that few had seen and lived to tell. The thing that made them stop dead in their tracks. A sight that made them freeze in place, rooted to the ground. The two young men gazed affrightedly, staring in cold, stark terror at the thing that sent them cowering in fear. They cringed, their basic instincts causing the foolish young adventurers to simultaneously crouch, to grow small, to hide themselves among the tall weeds. For that thing that gripped and held them so, dear Christ, was the spectral image afloat just above ground. It would be the first of what would be a veritable saraband of spectral wanderers. It was one of the lost souls, the souls of those who had been claimed by the swamp, souls of runaway slaves that had perhaps taken a misstep and found themselves trapped within the miry pits to be sucked down and forever forgotten. It was one of the blind dead, the legend that Mr. Grimes had described.
So picture this. You're in a quiet room, maybe, just reflecting on things, and then bam, a memory hits you. But it's not just any gentle memory, it's this like overwhelming wave, right? It mixes these really deep thoughts about society with this, I don't know, this sense of dread.
Yeah, and echoes of something really old, something that just refuses to stay buried. It's quite powerful.
Exactly. And that's the kind of unsettling space we're stepping into today. This deep dive is all about midnight pursuit into the swamps of the dead.
Yeah.
It's this really extraordinary excerpt that gives us two journeys almost.
Right, two distinct paths running side by side.
First, there's this really sharp social commentary. It looks at the Black experience in America, stretching from the 1930s right into the 21st century. And then, boom, it switches. We get this chilling supernatural story. Two boys back in 1932 heading into a haunted swamp, seriously haunted.
And what's so fascinating, what really grabs you, is how these two threads, separated by time, by genre even, are tangled together. They share this common ground of, well, struggle, betrayal, and this desperate fight just to survive, really.
So our mission today for you is to kind of unpack these layers. They're distinct, yeah, but thematically they're absolutely linked.
We'll guide you through these deep anxieties about identity, about progress, or maybe the lack of it. And then we'll plunge right into that terrifying story, courage, ghosts, the whole deal. And we'll try to pull out the connections, the questions that linger.
Okay, let's dive in. We start in the present with this young orderly. He's thinking about his patient, old Mr. Perkins, and Perkins's time, the 1930s, a time he frames as before the bomb, before the computer, before the jet, before America became a global empire.
He sets it up immediately as this almost alien past, totally different from his world.
Right, but then how does that contrast make his critique of the 21st century, especially for Black Americans, even sharper?
Well, that's where the source really lands its first punch. It sets up this really powerful dissonance. The core idea, the critique, is about what the orderly sees as just performative progress.
Yeah.
An illusion of change that doesn't touch the deep stuff.
The systemic issues.
Exactly. He reflects that for the rapidly diminishing Black populace, life in the 21st century appears very much like 1930s Mississippi. Now, that's not just history. That's a biting, cynical take on the present.
Wow, yeah.
And this disillusionment, it's so deep that the source shows him describing a, quote, so-called Black president in really provocative terms as a white man in blackface, which is obviously incredibly strong language from the source material.
Extremely strong.
And it's presented as reflecting his feeling of profound betrayal, this perceived lack of authenticity. He sees this figure as lacking of courage, of grit. A mulatto cringed when asked to stand up for his people, to speak out on behalf of their suffering. It really forces you, the listener, to think about that gap, that chasm between the symbols of progress and the actual lived experience.
And that feeling, that sense of betrayal, it goes way beyond just one person, doesn't it, in the text?
Oh, absolutely.
He asks, almost rhetorically, what good would voting do? What does that tell us about his faith in the whole system?
It signals this profound sense of abandonment. A feeling that the Black populace has been, and the words used are, cruelly betrayed, bamboozled. I mean, it highlights this deep, systemic distrust. And his view of Black politicians in the 21st century, it's scathing.
How so?
He sees them as just out to enrich themselves. Simple as that. He says they told the people what they wanted to hear, not what they needed to hear. Basically tickling their ears instead of empowering or enlightening them. He's not just hitting individuals. He sees a pattern he feels deserves the community.
He doesn't mince words. He calls them swindlers, buffoons, brainwashed by constant bombardment by the media, programmed to worship white culture. That's a heavy charge about cultural pressure, about assimilation.
Incredibly heavy. And he takes it even further. He identifies what he sees as the absolute peak, the apex, the very pinnacle of Everest of this worship. We're using this really potent, almost biblical language from the source. The orderly positions the white woman at this peak. He declares, like the whore of Babylon, white America demanded she be worshipped.
Wow.
It's presented as his way of conveying this immense, almost overpowering idealization he perceives. A cultural fixation that, in his view, actively pushes aside and devalues Black identity, Black relationships. It's a really dramatic and critical lens.
And this intense critique of the present then loops back, connecting us to Mr. Perkins's era, the 1930s. The source makes a point that back then, interracial relationships were strictly taboo, forbidden. That seems like a completely different world, yet it creates this interesting counterpoint.
Exactly. It's a fascinating insight in the text. It suggests that this external oppression, by blocking off certain avenues of validation, ironically pushed the Black community of that time inward. It fostered this unique, powerful internal search for beauty and self-worth. Well, the text says, the Black man was forced to look for the beauty that shined within his own people, his own women. He had to search deep within himself to find the beauty that God himself had placed within him. It's quite poignant, really. Finding resilience, finding identity despite the constraints, and introspection the orderly seems to feel is lost now in this push towards assimilation he critiques.
Okay, and this is where it starts to feel really chilling. The orderly looks ahead, 60, 70 years into his own future, and he's wondering about the fate of his people. The fears he voices are, they're terrifyingly specific.
Yeah, they really are. He worries about an ever-increasing pogrom of the Black race.
Yeah.
That specific word, pogrom.
Yeah.
Or that new man-made viruses accomplish its genocidal goal. Or even just a slow death brought about by unjust laws designed specifically to deprive Blacks of the right to vote.
You can just feel the weight of history in that fear. It's not abstract.
No, it's this sense of cyclical dread. That's the implication. It's not just future worries. It's projecting past and present experiences forward. It shows how deeply historical trauma, perceived ongoing oppression, can embed itself. It creates this expectation of more struggle, even existential threats, down the line.
It makes you think about how history isn't just history. It shapes how you see everything.
Absolutely. It creates this lens of perpetual vulnerability in his worldview.
But then right in the middle of these heavy thoughts, there's a sudden shift. Mr. Perkins grips the orderly's hand tight, and it yanks us and the orderly right back to the present moment and into a totally different story.
Right. Perkins starts talking about people from his past, local folks, Daryl, Bubba, Kevin, Pastor Jackson, Mrs. Hazel, and he mentions Mrs. Emma with real affection.
The tone is almost nostalgic, familiar, but then the weather outside changes and the mood just plummets.
Yeah, the trigger is so dramatic, almost theatrical in the text. A blinding flash of lightning followed by a deafening peal of thunder. And suddenly, Perkins is speaking in an affrighted whisper. He's not just remembering, he's trembling with cold, stark terror.
Like he's reliving it.
Exactly. As if the past isn't past at all, it's right there, torturing him now. It's the bridge from his lived life to this supernatural horror that's about to unfold.
So this memory takes us way back. The night before Christmas Eve, December 23rd, 1932. Muskie, Mississippi. There's this late-night prayer meeting happening, an annual ritual at Mount Olive First Missionary Baptist Church, a place with history founded back in the 1880s.
But young Perkins and his friend Kevin,
Yeah.
they've got other plans, secret plans, nothing to do with praying.
What are they up to?
They've made a pact. Meet at the crossroads at the stroke of 10. Their goal, to follow the mysterious Mr. Pickman.
Mr. Pickman, okay. Why is following him so significant or dangerous?
Well, it's where Pickman goes. He's been seen walking in the direction of the swamps, the haunted swamps, the swamps of the dead, and specifically heading towards old Granny Hagen, the conjure woman's shack.
Oh, boy. Okay, so haunted swamps, conjure woman, this sets a definite tone. Forbidden knowledge, danger. A place you shouldn't go.
Definitely. And then Pickman actually appears.
And his appearance adds to the dread, right?
Oh, yeah. He's clad in a black robe, a hooded robe, and he's carrying something significant. A thickly bound book.
Not just any book, though.
No. The text mentions it's the same book from that night at the cemetery when they narrowly escaped the wrath of the Thing.
Okay, the Thing. So this book is tied to something terrifying they've already encountered.
Precisely. It's a symbol of this malevolent power. It's a tool used to interact with something, well, inhuman.
And seeing it again as Pickman heads towards the haunted swamp and the conjure woman, that raises the stakes massively.
It signals this isn't just a risky adventure. It's like they're walking right back into the path of those same dark forces, maybe even deeper this time.
How does Kevin react? He must be terrified.
Totally. His reaction is pure fear. A stutter.
Yep.
Trembling hands. He needs reassurance. Are you sure? I mean, I ain't scared, but is you sure you want to do this? You can hear the hesitation.
But young Perkins, he pushes back a bit.
Yeah, he seems amused by the fear, almost, and he appeals straight to curiosity, that powerful driver. Ain't you curious? Don't you want to see what he been up to?
That classic challenge, are you brave enough? Are you curious enough?
And it works. This becomes a turning point for Kevin. A real moment of courage. He takes a deep breath, pushes the fear down, and shows what the source calls true grit.
How is he described?
Almost like a hero figure. Noble, regal, royal, like he tapped into this inner strength Perkins had never seen before.
Wow.
It's so powerful that Perkins thinks, hell, tonight I'd follow you through the gates of hell. It really highlights Kevin's transformation, how friendship, curiosity, maybe pride, can unlock bravery.
Little do they know, the source hints, that gates of hell might be closer than they think.
Exactly. As Pickman heads into the haunted swamps, the swamps of the dead, the boys follow. And the place itself, it starts to change, to become hostile.
Describe that transformation. How does the environment reflect the danger?
Oh, the author really goes all in here, plunges us into this truly malevolent place. The environment itself seems sick, suffering. We get these images, trees with limbs hideously contorted, looking like the half-starved arms and legs of tortured men. Their branches like rotted hands, hands with painfully arthritic fingers, cadaverous hands. And there's moss, but it's described as hanging mold having the unnerving appearance of necrotic flesh.
So it's not just nature, it's like nature mirroring death and pain.
Precisely. It feels like the land itself holds the trauma. There's thick, swampish slime everywhere, and dead and dying moss dangling down like long strips of greenish-purple flesh. It really blurs the line between plant life and decay.
And the path itself gets worse.
Yeah, the ground becomes treacherous. High weeds grew taller. The solid ground turns into mire. Thick mist began to rise. The road shrinks to a thin trail, and there's this ghostly miasma, like a foul vapor rising from boiling bog pits. It's a full sensory assault. Alien. dangerous.
What about the sounds, or lack thereof?
That's one of the creepiest parts. Amidst all this visual horror, there's graveyard silence. Utterly unnatural. No sounds of nature, no frogs croaking, no crickets chirping, nothing you'd expect in a swamp.
So what do they hear?
Just this god-awful sound, a hissing, bubbling sound of gases slowly escaping from the surrounding mud. It's the only sound, and it's deeply unsettling. It chilled the blood, turned the stomach, according to the text.
Like the swamp itself is breathing, or worse.
Exactly. These constant emissions from the deadly pits of quicksand, the way it burped and bubbled, belching forth a revolting miasma. The sulfur pits even look like open mouths, breathing, bubbling like a witch's cauldron, a cauldron of death, a crucible of horrors. This isn't just passive background. It feels active, malevolent.
And the source notes this feels different, more dangerous than their previous trip to Potter's Field.
Right. A definite escalation.
Yeah.
And just to add to the immediate physical danger, they have a close call with a diamondback rattlesnake.
Yikes. But they keep going deeper into this nightmare landscape, this phantasmagoria, as the text calls it.
They do. Driven by that initial curiosity, maybe now just momentum, and then they hear something else.
What is it?
A sound that cuts through the bubbling. A distant moan, a faint and lonely moan, and then the sound of a woman weeping. But it seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Ethereal. Haunting.
How does Kevin handle that after finding his courage earlier?
This seems to be the breaking point. His bravado swiftly fled away. His face showed a fearful unease. The courage had limits, apparently. This hits a different kind of fear. Primal.
The fear of the unknown, the unseen.
Exactly. The abstract horror of the place starts to become audible, personal almost.
And then the climax of this section, they see it. The thing that few had seen and lived to tell.
Yeah. The sight makes them stop dead in their tracks, freeze in place, just rooted to the ground. Pure instinct takes over. Cowering in fear, they cringed, trying to hide.
What is it? What do they see?
The source describes it as the spectral image afloat just above ground. A ghost, basically.
Just one?
No, that's the chilling part. It's the first of what would be a veritable saraband of spectral wanderers.
A saraband, like a procession, a dance.
Exactly. A formal, almost orchestrated movement of these ghostly figures. And the text gives them a specific, horrifying identity.
Which is?
They are one of the lost souls, the souls of those who have been claimed by the swamp. Specifically, souls of runaway slaves that had perhaps taken a misstep and found themselves trapped within the miry pits to be sucked down and forever forgotten.
Oh my God.
They are the blind dead, the legend that Mr. Grimes had described. So these aren't just random spirits. They are the literal ghosts of historical injustice trapped in this place. The forgotten victims.
Wow. That connects everything back in a really powerful, disturbing way. The historical suffering of the haunted land.
It absolutely does.
So let's try to wrap this up for you, our listener. We've really gone on two parallel journeys here, haven't we?
Definitely.
From the orderly's sharp, almost bitter analysis of racial dynamics and that feeling of cyclical injustice in modern America.
Right back to 1932 Mississippi, to this visceral, terrifying memory of two boys facing literal ghosts born from those very same historical wounds in that haunted swamp.
It's an incredibly potent pairing, the political and the supernatural feeding each other.
And the source really lays out these two ways of being trapped, of being lost, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
One is being caught in these societal structures, generation after generation, like a social swamp you can't escape, full of disillusionment, fear.
And the other?
The other is being literally trapped, swallowed by the physical swamp, the swamps of the dead, where the brutality of the past manifests as these spectral wanderers.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. What does it really mean? For a society, for an individual?
Yeah, what does it mean to deal with a past where these lost souls, whether they're metaphorical memories or literal swamp ghosts, are still wandering around, still demanding attention?
When that fight for real liberation, real escape from the mire feels like it just goes on and on, never quite finished.
How do you confront the ghosts of history when they refuse to stay buried, when they bubble up right into the present? Something powerful to think about.